When you stack all these guys up right next to each other, I don't know if it makes sense to have a big argument about putting one over another. There's going to be question marks with each one of these guys, but we know each one of them has a potential for a ton of volume and a lot of upside. Headliner Nation, it is time to wrap up our updated rankings after the NFL draft, and today I've got my top 24 wide receivers for you. And in my opinion, the wide receiver position is the hardest to try and do rankings for, because in today's NFL, there are so many different guys getting targets that it makes wide receiver one of the most volatile positions in all of football. And it also makes it one of the deepest, because you're going to have guys blowing up out of nowhere on any given week because of how many times teams pass the football. But I gotta take a moment to remind you that our 2024 Fantasy Football Draft Guide is already live and ready for you to jump into and start getting prepared for the season. The draft guide launched with tons of rookie and dynasty information to get you ready for those type of leagues. And then we're gonna be doing updates all off season long to add in all of that redraft content that you already love and expect every single year. And because the draft guide is digital, it's gonna be updated until the first week of the season with any major changes or news that ends up breaking. The link to order yours is in the description down below. And if this video gets 500 likes, I'm gonna pick somebody that orders their draft guide from the time this video drops till the end of the weekend to get theirs for free. So make sure you hit that like button, and if you've been thinking about ordering, order right now, because you'll have a chance to get refunded for yours. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. And for the top 6 guys, I'm gonna talk about all of them at the same time. All right, here are my top 6 wide receivers, and honestly, you could probably put them as 1A, B, C, D, E, and F, because all of these guys really, in my opinion, are interchangeable and could make a case for being the top overall wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb had a huge season last year, and he's going to be the main target in his offense. But have they done enough to help around him? Tyreek Hill at number 2, back-to-back years of 1,700 receiving yards with Tua, so we know he's going to eat. But last year, it felt like a lot of times he was banged up, and he ended up playing, but we were left guessing every single week, will Tyreek be at 100%, and what would that look like if he's not? I'm going to leave Justin Jefferson at number 3 because I still think that he can do enough with Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy to make things work for fantasy owners this season. But once again, how often could he find himself in a situation where he just doesn't have that big game that we need, and then in other times he absolutely blows up and he wins our entire week for us? Jamar Chase, we know for a fact that him and Joe Burrow have that connection, but how healthy is Joe Burrow? That's a big question mark here, because right now his wrist, he has said, feels pretty good. It's a little bit weak, but this wrist injury for quarterbacks is not something that we've seen a lot of. And when people have this wrist injury, a loss of sensation and grip can definitely happen. Amon-Ra St. Brown may be the safest wide receiver of this group, because his question marks really rely on how much volume will he get. But he's answered those questions a lot so far. Sam Laporta had a really good season last year. You lost Josh Reynolds. Some of those targets could end up going to Jamison Williams. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. This offense brings Ben Johnson back for another season. The question marks for Amon-Ra just don't add up like they do for some of the other guys. But the other guys ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown also, in my opinion, might offer a little bit more upside. And A.J. Brown at number 6. We know the dude can absolutely go off. And any fears of Devontae Smith being the wide receiver 1 over A.J. Brown have been absolutely just blown out of the water the last couple of years. Yeah, Devontae Smith got paid, but so did A.J. Brown. He's going to have himself another fantastic season. We just know with A.J. Brown, there will be some games where he disappears. When you stack all these guys up right next to each other, I don't know if it makes sense to have a big argument about putting one over another. There's going to be question marks with each one of these guys, but we know each one of them has a potential for a ton of volume and a lot of upside. All right, let's move on to number 7 through number 12, and we're going to kick that portion off with Garrett Wilson. Now, this group of wide receivers, we can probably start splitting hairs a little bit more with this group. Garrett Wilson is going to benefit from a healthy Aaron Rodgers this year and probably his first competent quarterback since he entered the league. For Garrett Wilson, he could end up being one of the biggest risers in fantasy points from 2023 to 2024. And it's not necessarily the upside I'm looking for with Garrett Wilson, it's just more consistency. And if he brings that to the table with Aaron Rodgers this year, he's easily inside the top 12. I'm going to roll Puka Nacua out at number 8. And even when Cooper Kupp came back last season, Nacua continued to absolutely dominate opposing defenses. Now, my biggest question when it comes to Nacua is actually the health of Matthew Stafford. As long as Stafford stays healthy, this offense will end up being just fine. But the reason I'm going to have Nacua inside the top 12 and not Cooper Kupp is because I do believe Cooper Kupp ends up missing time this season because he gets banged up. Maybe this is too high to have a rookie wide receiver, but I think Marvin Harrison Jr. can finish inside the top 12 this season. Now, the good thing for Marvin Harrison Jr. is he's going to be going to a team that ran the football very well last season and has a mobile quarterback that can get outside the pocket and keep plays alive. And we know that Trey McBride, coming off a really good season, will be another good target for Kyler Murray. So it's not like Marvin Harrison Jr. has to come in and just be the guy and the only guy on the field. There's going to be other options. And I don't think you're necessarily going to be able to just double team Marvin Harrison Jr. on a consistent basis. Volume will be the key for him. If he can find himself with a ton of targets this season, maybe he doesn't score as many touchdowns as we would like, but the receiving yards could end up being just fine and enough to keep him in this area. Brandon Ayuk is at number 10, and if for some reason Deebo Samuel were to be traded before the beginning of the season, he probably finds himself up above Garrett Wilson. So he could end up being a big riser in the rankings by the time the season starts. But the reason I can't go higher with him is the reason I just mentioned. You have Deebo Samuel. You have Christian McCaffrey. You have George Kittle. There's just so many weapons on this offense that consistency is an issue for Ayuk, even if his ceiling is huge every single week. Chris Olave was wildly inconsistent last season, and I really feel like that was more of an issue with the game plan than it was for Derek Carr or Chris Olave. Because I did a film breakdown on Chris Olave about halfway through the season last year. I think really at their bye week is when I did it. And when you watch the film, they were just sending Chris Olave on a ton of go routes and telling Derek Carr to throw it up. That's not what you should be doing with him. And honestly, I see his career path very similar to what CeeDee Lamb's was, because CeeDee Lamb was kind of the same way when he came into the league. And now they're really utilizing him all over the field, on the outside, in the slot, slant routes, go routes, crossing routes, out routes. They're running the entire tree with CeeDee Lamb now. As soon as you start to do that with Chris Olave, he could start putting up some really big numbers as well. And I know a lot of you out there don't like Derek Carr, but from a fantasy standpoint, he still can get it done for Olave. At number 12, Mike Evans. And I'm actually a little bit shocked by this one because I figured a lot of people were going to be like, Kyle, you're way too low on Mike Evans. I'm actually a lot higher than the consensus because the consensus rankings have him more of being like a mid to low end wide receiver too. Mike Evans had a huge year with the Bake Show last season. I expect him to have another good one this year as well. All right, moving on to number 13, Michael Pittman is a guy that I think a lot of people love. And then there's a lot of people that think he's overrated. But with Anthony Richardson, these two connected to begin the season quite a bit. And then Gardner Minshew continued to feed him targets last year. Now, they did draft Adonai Mitchell to sit outside opposite of Michael Pittman, and you have Josh Downs in the slot. But that's what makes Michael Pittman so dangerous, is that if you give him 8, 9, 10 targets a week, he's going to catch a majority of those targets. And maybe he doesn't put together a ton of 120, 150-yard games. Maybe he doesn't score a ton of touchdowns, but the volume alone is more than enough to warrant a top 13 ranking. Devontae Adams at number 14, and realistically, this is because of the quarterback situation. Now, I just mentioned Gardner Minshew a minute ago when it came to Michael Pittman being a good target last season. And Gardner Minshew, to me, is probably the best fit for the Las Vegas Raiders to start over Aiden O'Connell. And if he does, maybe Devontae Adams seems the same type of targets that we did last year. But again, I don't think the ceiling is that of a top 12 wide receiver. I think the ceiling is right about this area, or at least his floor is. And then on a weekly basis, he's going to give you some wide receiver 1 weeks. But I think we need to look at Davante Adams as a guy that kind of helps prop up our lineup instead of a guy that wins weeks for us. At number 15, I'm going to go with Drake London. And right after free agency, I did some rankings, and a lot of people were like, Kyle, you're way too low on Drake London. And I told everybody at that time, don't worry, he definitely could move up, but I want to see what happens in the draft first. I'm actually a lot higher than the consensus on Drake London right now. In fact, the consensus has Drake London as a wide receiver 3. So I think that tells you all that you need to know. But I definitely know the volume will be there for him this year. There's a lot of more targets, and the run game is definitely going to be there, and you have to think what's going to happen with Kyle Pitts. But for me, when I take a look at Drake London, he's not like the high upside wide receiver that Justin Jefferson was with Kirk Cousins, but I definitely think that he could be like Michael Pittman was last year with Gardner Minshew. And number 16, Deebo Samuel. And the one thing we know about Deebo is that because of the way he plays football, he's going to get banged up. And it might not cause him to miss some games, but it could cause him to maybe not be at 100%. But Deebo, they get him outside, they get him out of the backfield, they put him in the slot, they do a lot of really good things with him. And he can have some huge games. But I really think he's more of a safer target than what we would look at in terms of Ayuk having more upside. Number 17, DJ Moore. And DJ Moore had a fantastic season last year with Justin Fields. But you've added Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze is there now as well. Cole Kmet still going to be a good target for Caleb Williams, who is a rookie. So I think while with DJ Moore, we would like to get excited about it, I think we also need to be very, very cautious of the fact that he may not see the consistent amount of targets that we would like. And who knows, maybe Caleb Williams decides to lock onto someone else more often. And number 18, I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs. And I don't think he needs to be the primary wide receiver in Houston. In fact, I think it would be better for him in Houston if they continue to spread the ball around as much as possible. But with Stefon Diggs, he's not the guy anymore, like we saw when he was in Minnesota, or we've seen with him in Buffalo. Now he's got Nico Collins around him, breakout from last year. He's got Tank Dell, who had a big season last year until his injury, and is a favorite of CJ Stroud. You brought in Joe Mixon, so the run game gets a little bit of a buff this season. Right now for Stefon Diggs, he might see some consistent targets, but I don't think he sees a big amount of targets. Like, I don't think we're averaging double-digit targets a game this year, and I don't think he has the upside of some of the guys in front of him as well. In fact, we're going to move on to number 19 right now, who is his teammate, Nico Collins, who I believe has more consistent upside than what Stefon Diggs does, even if Stefon Diggs has a much more consistent floor. Because with Nico Collins, the breakout star from last season, who we take pride in telling everybody, go with Nico Collins last year, and he ended up returning value for you all. But this year, when you take a look at him, the volume, he may only see 4 or 5 targets a game, but out of those 4 or 5 targets, he could have a 60-yard touchdown pass. He could have an 80-yard touchdown. He could end up having over 100 yards. But those games aren't going to come on a consistent basis. So while his ceiling is going to be consistently high every single week, his floor may not be. And that's going to be an issue. At number 20, Jalen Waddle. And Jalen Waddle has had an issue staying healthy the last couple of years. And we already know Tyreek Hill is the #1 target in that offense. And last season, Miami launched out a huge upgrade at the running back position with Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, both who are back for this year, and they added Jalen Wright to the backfield as well. So the run game has been boosted up and is extremely important. And you also have Tyreek Hill getting umpteen targets a game as well. We used to look at Jalen Waddle as being a top 12 potential wide receiver, and I think we need to take that ceiling away and look at him a little bit differently moving forward. And I don't think that's a bad thing as long as we set those expectations prior to our draft. DK Metcalf at number 21, and we know that Metcalf is going to have some pretty big games. 2 years ago with Geno Smith, he ended up having a great season, and Geno was bounce back player of the year, and they did a lot of good things that a lot of us didn't really anticipate. And when he was bought into last season, Geno just was not able to keep it up. Heading into year 3 with Geno Smith at quarterback and Sam Howell on the bench, I think there's a potential that Smith could end up losing his job. And because there's some volatility in that offense, and you also look at Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and how much they'll run the football as well, DK Metcalf doesn't have the ceiling that he used to. At number 22, Amari Cooper. Now they've added Jerry Jeudy, and David Njoku is still a big part of that offense, and we still don't know about Nick Chubb and whether or not he'll be ready to begin the season. Amari Cooper should end up leading this team in targets once again, and Deshaun Watson will start going back to him as soon as they're on the field together. But sometimes that's an issue because Deshaun Watson just has not been that great since he got to Cleveland. If he can get back to the way he was in Houston, then boom, Amari Cooper is going to shoot up rankings. But until I see that happen consistently, I think with Amari Cooper, we just need to play it a little bit more safe. Let's go with Devontae Smith at number 23, and I'm actually a little bit higher on Devontae Smith than the consensus as well. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, yo, Devontae Smith, why is he not higher? And I get that, and I understand it, but A.J. Brown is going to be the main target in that offense. You still have Dallas Goedert there. Improved run game with Saquon Barkley. Devontae Smith, to me, is another one of those guys that is absolutely going to have some big-time potential any given week, but he's also not going to see the consistent number one targets in that offense either, and if they start to run the football a little bit more often, there could be a drop on that as well. And at number 24, I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp. Now, he may not play 17 healthy games, but if he gives you, let's say 10, 11, 12 healthy games, he could still finish as a low-end wide receiver too. Just don't draft him that high because if he's not playing on the field more than what we need him to, he's obviously not going to be out there to give you the points all season long. Now, there's going to be a few guys on the outside looking in that I know people are going to have question marks on. So let me address several of them super quick. George Pickens, I liked him last season. I would love to put him inside the top 24. But we don't know who the quarterback is going to be for the entire season. Russell Wilson is likely to start it, but if that dude doesn't get his stuff together quickly, they can move to Justin Fields really fast. And as far as the passing game goes, I just don't know how many targets are going to be there for him. Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator, and we didn't trust him last year in Atlanta, and I still really don't trust him this year. T. Higgins, how many games does he even end up playing? Whether it's due to injuries or not being happy about his contract, how often is he actually on the field? Malik Neighbors, awesome talent, crappy quarterback. Zay Flowers, I love his potential, but you still have Rashad Bateman, who was just extended. You're still going to have Mark Andrews. And is there a rededication to the run game with Derrick Henry? Christian Kirk definitely has top 24 potential, but how is the offense going to work now that you've added Brian Thomas? You still have Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, and a lot of weapons as a whole, including Gabe Davis on that offense. Keenan Allen, lots of other pass catchers around him, and at his age, does he start to miss a few more games than what we would like? Tank Dell, I'm sorry, but with the weapons there in Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins and the upside that Nico Collins has every single game and how good Stephon Diggs has been, for me personally, coming back from that injury, do we see any type of a slow start to the season? Again, just question marks for me right now. And there's gonna be even more guys that were not mentioned in this video that I know that you all wanna hear about. So if there is somebody I didn't talk about, leave me a comment down below and I'll give you my thoughts on them as soon as possible. But don't forget, hit the like button, because if you order your draft guide between now and the end of the weekend from when this video drops, I'm gonna choose one of those people to get their draft guide for free if we get 500 likes. But for now, Headliner Nation, I'm gonna get out of here. Peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.